Good evening, everyone. It's such an honor to be with you all tonight. My name is Jolana Kinlaw. I am a licensed mental health counselor and substance abuse counselor, but my child is 7 and has blessed me to be part of the autism journey. And so I've been with ASNIC for right about a year right now, and I'm also an autism resource specialist for the Pitt County area and surrounding areas, and it's a pleasure to be with you all tonight.
Hi, everyone. I'm Louise Southern, and I'm just really honored to be co-presenting with Jolana tonight. I've been with the Autism Society for about 7 years, and I've been working in the field of autism intervention since 1998. And I'm just excited to try to support you all in addressing what we know are some significant challenges of online learning through collaborative problem solving. Our brief objectives are to offer some practical autism-informed strategies that might support individuals with autism and their caregivers in participating in online learning or telehealth services. And these strategies are geared towards parents and caregivers. These strategies are also geared towards what we would often see educators and other professionals applying, whether that's in a traditional brick and mortar setting or modified versions of these strategies presented in a virtual format. So we hope that these strategies will be relevant across, no matter who you are or why you're here tonight. And then, of course, we want to outline some key considerations and guidelines that might promote positive collaboration between caregivers and professionals during this challenging time. So, this has just not been an easy time. And as has been said by many about this pandemic, we are all in this together, but we are not all in the same boat. And as it pertains to online learning and autism, the same is likely true as well. For some with autism, this may have been a time or may be a time for them to shine, even more so, without the sometimes overwhelming pressure of classroom settings, keeping up with the pace of classroom instruction in real time, peer and social demands. But for others with autism, this is a very challenging time where students with autism are without the structure and predictability of their brick and mortar school settings and are encountering instruction that may look very different from what they're accustomed to. For some students with autism, school is school and home is home, and those two contexts do not mix for them. And so some may not understand why particular activities and demands are now a part of their home experience. And of course, parents and caregivers, those of you who are parents and caregivers out there in the audience, you're now facing the new and tremendous challenge of facilitating and overseeing your child's educational day on top of every other demand that you already experience. And then, of course, we need to remember this too, that many educators and other professionals in the field are not only working so hard to support their students with autism and other students, but they themselves are also parents and caregivers simultaneously navigating the challenges of supporting their own children. So this phase looks very different for each person, but whatever it looks like for you, we know that this can be very challenging. And just to kind of keep it real, Jolana and I are all about keeping it real. So,
Very much
Mark,
so.
I'm the parent of 3 boys, and when school closed back in March, I thought that I would have it together. The structure, the organization, the creative and fun approaches. I was ready to Mary Poppins the heck out of this situation every day. And because, after all, I'm an educator. I'm a behavior analyst with 22 years experience in the field. So I felt like I should have it together. But of course, little did I know, right? So I don't want you guys to think I have it all together as I present as through a professional lens on this. I do not have it all together, and I've been really hard on myself across these last few months about this fact. So, I don't know what it's like to have a child with autism, and this is one of the many reasons why it was so important to have Jolana's critical perspective on her experience during this phase. So, Jolana, how's it been for you?
I just want to be
How's
very
it been going?
transparent and let everyone know that this picture was actually taken this morning. I am a mother of 2 boys. I actually have a 5-month-old, and my son was born April 4th, shortly after the pandemic hit. So Caden, my son, got school ripped from him and then had a brand new sibling at home. And so I just thought, surely I had it together. I can handle this. I can teach him. Absolutely not. I would say we are just now getting in the rhythm to where he actually can identify that He's home and that school is going to be home because, like Louise said, Caden is one of those kids whose school is school and home is home. So it was very difficult for him to even comprehend why all of a sudden he was at home. And so now with school starting back, we're merging back and trying to get him to understand that school is going to be home, not only at home, but on a computer. So I think as being an autism resource specialist, one of the biggest things that I thrive from is the fact that we are able to help other parents because we are parents walking in the journey just as they are. And even though everybody's journey is different, we can walk it together and kind of share similar experiences and ideas and just kind of piggyback off of each other because, again, we're in this together.
So this workshop or webinar tonight, that Jelana and I put together, I think that a lot of the strategies and advice and guidance that Jelana is going to give and that I'm going to give are highly relevant across the autism spectrum. I want to make that very clear. But some of the examples that we've provided, and obviously given Jelana's personal experience with this, we've targeted this particular webinar primarily as we're thinking about those students with autism who are accessing the extended content standards, and for whom it may be even more difficult for them to access and understand and attend to virtual or online content. So we just wrote a few couple case examples. This first one I did is just Jenny. She's a 15-year-old student. Maybe some of you all will recognize someone like Jenny in a student with whom you're working, or maybe in your own child. And Jenny struggles with the back and forth of conversation, very much so, and she may not consistently respond to questions or comments, and she may struggle to stay engaged in an interaction with other people. Right now in the classroom, or before COVID hit, she was spending about 15 minutes in individualized teacher-led instruction before she needed breaks. So 15 minutes was her maximum before she started to struggle to attend and to stay focused. She needs lots of positive reinforcement in all kinds of forms, really creative forms of reinforcement from educators and others to stay engaged. And group instruction has been even more challenging for Jenny to attend during those small group activities. And she needs lots of individualized direct cues and prompting to respond and to attend in a small group format. And so she also needs movement and sensory breaks across her day, many, many times across her day. And so she learns best when she's presented with a combination of pictures and words and manipulatives and objects and direct modeling and demonstration. And she needs many practice opportunities and examples in order to acquire new skills and concepts and in order to begin to generalize those concepts. So this is Jenny, and here's Caden.
Okay, so the second case example is Caden, who is my son. Caden is 7 and he is nonverbal and he struggles with sensory processing and is full of energy. So Caden, prior to the pandemic, he was in a classroom that was self-contained with about 6 to 8 other students, and he had a teacher assistant that went with him everywhere. He spent most of his primary day in the classroom, and then he would do the extracurricular activities with mainstream students. So Caden needs consistent visual cues. He needs consistent sensory breaks between each activity. He needs a combination of modeling and demonstration, and he definitely needs consistent repetition. And a lot of times Caden gets confused or frustrated during transition, and sometimes there would be unwanted behavior. So we would also have to have interventions in place for that. So you can definitely try and imagine a child like Jenny or like Caden that may struggle trying to attend or even engage virtually via a computer. And so as we go throughout the remainder of the presentation, we will just focus on strategies and even guidelines and promote positive collaboration to be able to kind of assist you all in how you can advocate for children that may look like Jenny or Caden to get their needs best met via virtual learning. So in Caden's example, I highlighted some of his issues, and here I just really wanted to express to the parents that some of the behaviors, or in the professionals, some of the behaviors and stuff that are highlighted, some of the solutions that are also highlighted with that will be what Luis will kind of talk about throughout the presentation. So for example, a student who may have sensory processing, a barrier for virtual learning may be the background noise for an instructor's computer, or external stimuli in the child's home environment, such as a doorbell, a dog barking, or even the lighting. And so a lot of times kids with sensory deficiencies will need those sensory breaks, or they may need headphones to assist with blocking out some of the noise, or just mainly the parent knowing how to set up the child's learning environment for success, which is something that Luis will go into more detail about.
So we're going to talk about some basic instructional support strategies. And Jelana, I definitely want you to add in the ways in which, reflect back and offer up the ways in which these strategies have applied and are relevant, and bring this to life and help me bring this to life whenever you want to, just interject. And so basically these instructional support strategies that we're going to talk about are intended to support our students with autism as they access virtual content and also as they access live activities in the home setting that are intended to address some of the academic or functional goals that the educational team and the parents and caregivers may have for that child. There are really 4 big buckets that we need to consider. And so I've organized these strategies in these 4 buckets of setting the stage for success, proactively planning for frequent breaks, using creative approaches to get and sustain engagement, and then finally prioritizing what really matters most right now. So first and foremost, when we think about supporting our children or our students with autism in this new context in which they are learning at home, we have to think about how can we try to set the stage for success. And many of you all are probably very familiar with these strategies, but for some of you, this may be new, or this may provide some of you an opportunity to refine or tweak some of the strategies that you already knew about, and make it even more successful for the student you are supporting. So first and foremost, what I have found right now as a practitioner who is supporting some individuals with autism in telehealth formats, in our clinical department, for example, we have found that it is critical that for some of those learners who really struggle to attend for any amount of time, that we have to know that we're going to start from a very short duration. So it's just not feasible for us to expect some of the people with whom I work and some of the students with whom I work that they're going to sit and attend to virtual content for 30 minutes or to sit down at a table with their parent and engage in a structured activity for that long.
Absolutely.
So very short online sessions or very short live sessions. I'm not kidding you guys. We have some clients where we've started with 5 minutes, and that is the point at which we know we've made it successful. Now it's time to push pause and go to something different. And so I would just say to parents and professionals, use your existing data, whether that's real data, hardcore data that educators are taking or they have it from the previous school year, or that parents just anecdotally understand about their child. How long can they really sit and engage and attend? And start below that number so you can stay in the zone of success rather than please
Really quick, I want to key in on this because this is something that I realized as a parent. When I looked at Caden's IEP and realized how many times they were allowing him to sit, like they would have him sit for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And so when it became live and at home, I realized that having him sit for 10 to 15 minutes just wasn't likable. And that's why he was having so many meltdowns and behavior. So I literally had to scale it down to 2 minutes with a timer. We did that several nights for like a week, and then we moved it up to 5 minutes, and then we moved it up to 10 minutes. So parents too, just because the IEP or whatever the history or data of your child, the teacher says, a child can sit for 10, 15 minutes. That may not be so at home because the child's in a completely different environment. So know too that you may have to kind of create your own agenda and create your own data to kind of see what will work best for that child at home now that the learning environment is going to be at home.
That's such a good point, that home and school is school, and that is a hard distinction to break for some of our children and adults with autism. So just stay in the zone of success, right? That's the zone you want to stay in, and don't wait for the meltdown. And like Jelana just mentioned, use a visual timer. That previous slide showed just one example of the time timer, which is kind of a concrete representation of the passage of time. There are so many visual timers out there in the world of autism and developmental disabilities intervention. Many teachers, I know all you educators are familiar with these tools. And so parents, there are apps out there that you can download on your phone that use these same strategies of presenting time and the passage of time. So do it in a way that's meaningful for your child so they know, how long am I going to have to work? How long am I going to have to sit here? Other important strategies to keep in mind, setting the stage for success, and I know this is going to be very different in different home settings, but to the degree that you can, establish a place and a space where academic or work is going to happen, academic instruction. Again, define the context and define that space for your child. Sometimes that can provide a lot of clarity around what the expectations are. Whereas if it's sort of very mixed in with other parts of the home, for some students with autism, certainly not all, but for some students with autism, that can make it much more difficult for them to understand what it is that they're about to have to engage in. And so I would just say, consider that place and space. I'm going to talk about examples of visual supports that can clarify for individuals with autism how much and how long and when finished, and I'll show you examples of that. Of course, we need to think about determining, what is that individualized ebb and flow? And Jelana talked about what her ebb and flow is for Caden of, if we're working up to 5 minutes and then we're moving on to a fun preferred activity that maybe involves movement and sensory breaks and social activities or social reinforcement. So finding that ebb and flow where, how long can your child work, quote unquote, before we're going to give them a break. And for many of our individuals with autism, particularly many who are accessing the extended content standards, there's going to have to be a heavy ebb and flow versus long periods of work. And again, be ready to adjust that day by day. This is true for all children. Some students are having a good day one day, and they can maybe go a little longer, and then the next day, for whatever reason, it's just almost impossible. And so be ready to make modifications to what your expectations are for your child and for that student. And then, of course, as for parents, and of course, educators are doing this, obviously, but for parents, as you can, document daily progress that you can support the teacher in providing some information data to help the educators understand what is this looking like at home? How is your child responding in the home setting to the academic activities and in virtual content presented? And that data can come in a lot of different forms, parents, and I know Jelana and Kim obviously could talk about this as well, but it just needs to demonstrate, what's the students working on. Maybe it could be, simple like frequency or accuracy counts, or taking basic data on like how long was Caden able to sit for this particular activity before he needed to get up, for example. How many minutes was it? Taking pictures or videos may be sufficient. The permanent products of their work. So just think about some really parent-friendly, easy ways that you might be able to collect some basic information on how your child is responding to this new world of instruction. When we kind of circle back, so setting the stage for success, we could all talk about this till we're blue in the face, but try to figure out ways that you might be able to use visual supports to answer these questions for your student with autism or your child with autism. Answer these questions in a way that that individual can understand from their perspective. So how much do I have to do? How long will it last? And when do I get to have my preferred activity, for example? So I'm just going to quickly move through these slides. We have a number of webinars, and Kim's going to put these in the chat for you all. Just reminding you of where you can go to see recorded webinars that go into great depth or much greater depth on visual supports and structuring activities for individuals with autism. But here are a few quick examples and sort of at a very concrete level. So for example, you can see here, these are 2 bins that contain the information of how much and how long and when finished, that's presented in a way that this child with autism can understand it. So you can see here in the first bin, there's, okay, we need to do a diaper change. And in the second bin there, you can see it's one of their preferred books like Brown Bear, Brown Bear. So it's conveying to this child with autism in a way that they can understand it, how much, how long, and when am I going to be done? When am I going to get the book I want as soon as I've got my diaper changed? And so obviously I know we're not working with toddlers with autism as we're talking about this particular target audience, but apply this same concept to whatever age the student is. Apply the concept of answering this question of how much and how long and when finished. So you can see here on the right, this is an example of a visual schedule for an individual named Steven, quote unquote. And so you can see here, this is an object-based schedule. It moves the individual through what's going to happen and in what order, but in a very concrete way, using actual like 3-dimensional objects versus just using pictures to show that individual what he is going to have to do and when is he going to be done with it. And so each object represents that activity for that individual. This is something that, this may be in place already within your child's classroom setting. And so in some cases, it's going to be important to maybe get some help and coaching from the educator on how can I implement something like this at home for my child to support them. And that's definitely something that you can collaborate with your educational team on. Other examples, I'm just kind of moving up the scale of showing you ways to answer the questions of how much and how long and when finished in general terms for the individual with autism. So you can see here a few other examples at different levels of complexity. You can see here a written daily schedule where you're presenting the information in written form with times indicated. You can see another example here of a first then picture schedule. And in this example, it shows, I think, first eat, and then the next photo shows that child on their iPad. So first I'm going to have to do this, and then I'm going to get to the thing I love. You can see another example over here on the right of a picture-based schedule that shows in concrete photograph form what's going to happen and in what order. And so these are obviously tools and evidence-based practices that you would expect to see in many students with autism's classrooms. But for the home setting, think about how you might be able to take some of these pieces and apply them if you think that would be helpful to the student with autism or to your child with autism, in supporting and being able to understand the expectations about the ebb and flow of work. Remember, I talked about that ebb and flow in online learning. If they're going to have to do a little bit of work, when is it going to be over? And what's going to happen after the work? What's going to be the thing that they're going to get to do that they enjoy, that they might be motivated to work for or work towards? Other examples here of just breaking it up and showing the individual with autism in a way that's understandable to them. How much, how long, and when is it over? And so you can see here, this is a strategy it's highly relevant in the school setting, and it's highly relevant in some cases when we're trying to support our own children with autism in the home setting and getting the work done. So this is just one example. First, they have to do math, then they're going to do flashcards, and then they get a 5-minute break. And as the child or student completes each of these, they can pull that sticky note off and throw it in the trash. And that's the way that conveys to them in a very concrete way, when is this going to be over? When is the light at the end of the tunnel? And you can see the progression through this. For some with autism, we know the breaks need to be more frequent than this. We might need to have a break after every 2 word problems, after every 3 flashcards. So thinking about your own child with autism or thinking about that specific student with autism, recognizing that different individuals with autism are going to need breaks at different frequencies. That's going to be really important as we think about supporting them in this online learning phase, and of course, when they go back to school as well. Other quick examples. I don't want to belabor the point here. I'm just trying to show you all there's so many ways to answer these questions for a student with autism of how much and how long and when finished. Breaking it first 5 math problems, and then we get our tablet. This is something, of course, for this particular parent, they're able to whip this up on a little whiteboard in 2 seconds, and this can prevent some of the meltdowns and argument that we might be seeing in some of our children with autism when the parent or caregiver is having to support them in the home setting and getting some of their work done. Here's another quick example, very quick adjustments to this worksheet to make this more manageable for this particular student with autism. So they can see, I don't have to do the whole worksheet right now. I'm going to do the first block and then take a break, and then the next block and take a break, and then the next block. So what I've tried to show you all here is sort of different levels of complexity as well in presenting this information, depending on the particular student or child who you are supporting. Again, these questions can be answered in so many different ways, but I think it's really important for us as educators and us as parents to try to think about how can I answer these questions in a way that my child or my student will truly understand. So you can see here in this middle picture, there's some red and yellow manipulatives. And let's say that you're working with your student or your child at home on counting with one-to-one correspondence. So you're trying to support them in accurately counting those chips. Or maybe they're sorting them into different colors of red and yellow. Or maybe they're working on basic patterning of red, yellow. Whatever the activity or the goal of that is, thinking about if we have this little bin over here on the right that's labeled as done, and we're using these manipulatives, as the child or student uses these manipulatives in the activity, he or she can put them away into that done bin. And as they're moving them, counting them, they can see how much more work I have to do before this work is over. That's a concrete way to answer the questions of how much and how long and when finished. Or see here the hourglass, to tell the time. How long am I going to have to read with my parent? Or how long am I going to have to do this activity? Another example here on the bottom, you can see of matching letters. This is a basic folder task where the student with autism is matching letters, and what's contained in that Ziploc bag. It shows them concretely and visually, how many more letters do I have to do before this is over? And when that bag is empty, the question is clear. I'm all done now. So just think about, how can we be more clear and concrete in clarifying these expectations as we're presenting academic content to our students and to our children with autism. And again, just thinking about, give me a break, right? So proactively planning for calming and movement activities. And really, I would say, make sure that we're planning for those to happen well in advance of the meltdown. So just, don't wait for the meltdown to happen before we're giving the break. And if you're a parent, you can kind of see those early indicators that maybe your child is starting to wane in their focus, or they're starting to get frustrated. And so I would say, make sure that you're building in those breaks well in advance of those moments. And same, of course, for educators. We got to be proactive in our approach. And then thinking about online instruction, I just have a few more quick points to make before I hand it over to Jelana. It's so critical that we remember that if a student is encountering their teacher for the first time, for example, in a virtual world or online world, even if they knew the teacher from last year, let's say, and I have found this to be true in my own work and with my colleagues as well, they all feel that often when they're having to engage a person with autism who they know very well or knew very well when they could go to their home or go into the classroom and see them, but now it's a whole new ball game when it's online or virtual. And so it often requires that we as professionals are rebuilding that relationship, in some cases almost from scratch, all over again. And so how do we do that when we're supporting some of our students with autism? So using those preferred and understandable themes, those themes and activities and images and videos and music, for example, that might spark that individual's interest, that might begin to just get them a little bit engaged in coming over to the computer, if for only 2 or 3 minutes, right? So thinking about, how can I draw their attention and their focus in? Using those areas of focus that particular student with autism or those students with autism are more likely to be inclined to engage around. And starting, for example, with mastered and familiar concepts, for sure. When we do present academic content as educators and as professionals, it's really important, obviously, that we're not starting with new content. And this is, of course, true for parents as well, but really working on review to kind of just build momentum and warm the student back up to this new format of learning that they're not very accustomed to. And then finally, just remembering that at first we need to make sure we're seeking responses from that student or your child with autism that are most preferred or easiest for that learner. And so in some cases that might not be vocal responses. Instead, it might be manipulating items or movement activities or selecting from a range of options. So knowing your child with autism or knowing that student with autism, how do they most readily respond? What's the easiest response forms for them to use? Is it pointing? Is it moving? Is it manipulating objects? Is it selecting from visual choices? How do they best respond and answer questions or engage with you? It's going to be really important to think about using those forms as your go-to, particularly when we're starting to engage in this online learning world. And then just finally, I would say, focusing on what matters most, of course, and making it meaningful and functional and motivating. And of course, you family members and parents are going to have to communicate with the educational team and vice versa. Of course, the educational team is going to communicate with you and collaborate around what are the priority areas of focus right now and always, and what do we need to be most working on during this challenging time. And so with that, I just want to pass it over to Jelana because she's going to talk about that positive collaboration and necessity for communication between the educators and family members.
Absolutely. Thank you, Louise. And I will say, is, as Louise has talked about, a very challenging time. And I do want to be a little bit transparent just to how I got to some of these points and kind of my background and how I kind of got here. So when the pandemic hit, of course, I tried to do virtual learning with Caden, and it was very frustrating. It was a lot of nights of crying. It was a lot of nights of being disappointed and just feeling like I was not doing enough for my child. And it was frustrating because it was really in my face. One thing the pandemic has allowed for me is that my son's learning, how he learns, his behaviors, it's been in my face. It's been in my face every day. And so I'm constantly having to look at it and trying to problem solve what's going to work for him. So what I learned in the first few weeks was that some of the learning styles and stuff that was put in place at school wasn't necessarily the best thing for Caden. So what I want to encourage parents to do during this time of the pandemic and just virtual learning, kind of switch the perspective, kind of look at it as this is a new journey, a new way for you to kind of see how your child learns. Look at it as a way for you to be able to collect different data regarding behavior, regarding maybe some different rewards that they respond to. I learned recently that Caden's motivation is movement. It's not necessarily stickers or music or food. It's being able to move around. And I don't think I would ever come across that had it not been in my face and me trying to constantly figure out what is going to motivate Caden to learn. So I just want to kind of give a little bit background of how I got here to some of these points, because it's definitely not easy trying to remain positive in this journey and collaborate with a team that can best meet the needs for your kids. Louise, you can go ahead to the next slide. So some of the key points that I will be hitting on tonight as far as collaborating and creating that positive relationship with your child's team is come as a team player, be genuine, set clear expectations, know your child's IEP, come with the mindset that the teacher has the child's best interests, always, unless it's proven otherwise. Use open-ended questions when appropriate. So when we're looking at this slide right here, it's talking about knowing your child's IEP, which will help you know your options. Understanding your child's IEP is the first step toward developing a proactive plan to work with, you will work with your child's team. Knowing your child's IEP goals will help you, so to speak, use leverage to advocate for your child for what they need. So I provided an example that says, Miss Faith, I know 6 hours is not feasible, and you know you have a lot going on as you're balancing teaching face-to-face and online. Can we brainstorm additional options that can be helpful for Caden, you, and myself? Can you explain to me how homebound can potentially supplement Caden's IEP needs? So here you can see that I'm kind of getting in the teacher's world by, she's telling me that she's trying to balance face-to-face and online learning. So she's kind of telling me what her struggle is and what she has to do in the classroom. And I'm on the other end trying to say, well, we know that 6 hours isn't feasible virtually for Caden. So how can we meet in the middle so that Caden can still get what he needs and his IEP can still be met? So some of the takeaways from that example was acknowledging your educator's challenges to provide online face-to-face learning. Let them know how valuable their time is, which is exactly what I did in that previous example. I was letting her know that seeing that she has face-to-face and she's trying to do virtual, I understand that that need has to be met, but how can we make that applicable to Caden's needs? And I used the open-ended question by saying, hey, how can homebound can potentially supplement Caden's IEP needs? So that she had to kind of give me some information and give me some feedback, and it couldn't just be a yes or no answer. She kind of had to maybe think about it, like, is homebound an option, or how can we better meet his needs? And two, I want to put out there that this is just an examples. This may not meet everybody's district or everybody's county's needs. You can definitely reach out to your local autism resource specialist to figure out what would work best for your child in your district and county. This is just an example of how I would collaborate and kind of use my words to advocate for my child's needs while keeping in mind that the teacher wants the best for my child, and keeping in mind their schedule, and that too they are facing new barriers as well, as we're all in this together. Clear expectations. What are your child's triggers? So clear expectations, knowing that if your child has certain behaviors and knowing those triggers, it's not going to be a surprise to the team. They too should know that if Johnny doesn't have a visual cue before he gets done doing an activity, when he transitions, he's going to have a meltdown. The team should know that. So when you're speaking in terms of virtual and you're doing things online, your child may too still need those same cues, but they may look different since it's at home. So being able to problem solve those things with the teacher. Well, normally at school, you know, we do this, we provide this virtual before he goes to the bathroom. Okay, can we provide that same virtual cue at home? If not, what are some suggestions that we can use that would be similar to still get Johnny to be able to transition without having a meltdown? Knowing what that behavior looks like. And to parents, it's very important that you collect data on what the behavior looks like at home, because it could look different at school. For example, Caden being at home now, there's a lot more hitting and aggression just because he feels like he can do that with mom. Whereas at school, he holds it together a little bit better. And I've noticed at home, he just kind of wells and lets it all out. So there's had to be some extra barriers put in place at home for him that may not have been needed at school. So it's very important too that you're looking at that data and you're having those things to look back on, because week 3 may look better than week 1. And if you have that written out, you can kind of explain that to the teacher and what interventions and things that you used at home that were beneficial. How long can they sit and attend to a lesson? So earlier, Louise talked about, you know, starting the time very small, like 5 minutes, and building up. For Caden, we'll be doing his therapy sessions. We'll be starting very small, 10 to 15 minutes. His speech and OT that he'll be getting at school, he'll be starting those 10 minutes 3 times a week until we can build up and the team together decides that he can move forward to 20 and the full 30-minute session. And I think that's important for kids on the spectrum, just because it gives them that consistent routine. Right now, parents, I encourage you just to really focus on small victories, not so much trying to get every IEP goal, every assignment done. Just focus on small victories and building that consistency and routine to make learning fun for your child, especially at home during these times. Initially, I was just overwhelmed with trying to meet every IEP goal. He has to know his numbers, he has to know his colors, he has to know all these things, and he was having a terrible time, and the whole time he was having behaviors, and it wasn't fun for me or him. And so I had to kind of change the perspective and kind of look at it like, what can I learn about my child today? And so when I did that and I kind of changed the question and perspective, I was able to learn that Caden loves movement. Caden's behaviors are a little bit more aggressive at home versus at school. And so I've just been able to learn different things about him that will help me set up his learning space at home for success. So I think that too is something that you want to really focus on in these initial weeks, is setting up the home setting to be successful for them. And in order to do that, you're going to have to collect data on what it's like for them to learn in their home environment. Yep, you can continue. How to collaborate with your child's instructor. I will say I do have a professional background as well, and it was very difficult learning how to advocate for Caden early on, because I came in as that parent that was, well, it needs to be this way, it needs to be that way, and there's no exceptions. And if you come in with that kind of energy, no one is going to want to work with you. In advocating for your child, you have to realize that collaboration equals relationship. You want to relate with your child's teachers and their therapists.
But what she wanted to make sure that was conveyed on this particular page is really how to just understand where your teacher's coming from, help them understand where you're coming from, that we're really working towards thinking about the child, they're first and foremost, and how can we all kind of join each other on the same page and ensure that they're able to access as much of the agreed upon curriculum that they can. Louise, you want to move to the next slide? So just as a reminder of some of the points that Jelana wanted to make here is the importance of really coming as a team player. Try to be as genuine as you possibly can be on both sides. Set clear expectations, know your child's IEP, come with the mindset that the teacher really does have the child's best interest, and using those open-ended questions for clarification is really, really important. If you don't understand what's being said to you, whether it's the parent to the teacher or the teacher to the parent, I cannot tell you how many IEP meetings and how much parent conference meetings that I've been to, and I realized very early on that it all had to do with what I call semantics, just people truly not understanding what each other was trying to talk with each other about, and not quite understanding what they were saying.
Really, I mean, just remembering we're all in this together. We might not all be in the same situation, of course. That is very clear. There's no doubt about that part of this. But just trying to be kind and giving folks the benefit of the doubt as we communicate with them. I'm having to remember this in many interactions as I advocate for my 3 children in different ways. And I don't have children with autism, absolutely, but just being kind and remembering this piece. And I would say again, as I went through those strategies very quickly because I wanted to really honor Jelana's time and make sure that she was able and Kim was able to talk about sort of the guidelines for effective collaboration and communication across the educational and caregiver team. And so I want to say again, with those strategies, if for those of you who, for example, who are parents and maybe many of you, I think, probably have seen those strategies many times before, but some of you maybe haven't. And so in some cases, what we're seeing is that maybe a child with autism didn't need some of those strategies in the school setting, but because the context is so different, they are requiring a higher level of strategies in the home setting to support that child and understand the expectations. And so for those of you parents, if you're unclear on how to implement any of those strategies, or you're not sure the right level of complexity of a particular visual support, for example, to use, the people to go to should be the educational team, because they can be there to provide consultation and coaching to you and give you ideas, and in some cases perhaps even give you the materials that you need to support you in developing some of that structure. So I would say that if you have those kinds of questions, obviously we here at the Autism Society are happy to talk to you about those strategies too. But as Kim, I know, has said at the very beginning of this, go back to your school system, go back to that educator and ask for help and convey where you're needing some assistance and support. It's just the communication piece, obviously, it's just so critical. It really makes or breaks a relationship, particularly in these challenging times, and always when you're advocating for your child with autism, or on the flip side, for you educators who are communicating with parents, keeping the importance of communication in mind. So just a few quick resource slides that I wanted to touch on, and we certainly hope we're going to be getting some questions from you all. We welcome those questions. Obviously, Kim mentioned this at the beginning. Kim and Jelana are both autism resource specialists. Kim is, of course, the director of family services, and we strongly encourage you to reach out. They are kind of our first line of defense for all parents and self-advocates and individuals who are looking for support across the state of North Carolina. So we encourage you to reach out to the autism resource specialists of the Autism Society. They are parents and they understand firsthand this experience. I also want to point you all to a service that's being offered by my department, the clinical department of the Autism Society. We are able to provide in every county of North Carolina right now because it's telehealth based. So during this COVID phase, where we are providing a number of services via telehealth, we're able to provide in some situations short-term consultation to support families and caregivers. And this consultation is funded through a number of different sources, such as the Innovations Waiver. It's funded by Medicaid. It's funded through various private health insurances and other sources. A couple criteria, just must have an established diagnosis of autism. The service is not intended to address extreme forms of problem behavior or mental health crisis. And the reason for that is because it's a telehealth-based service, we have to be able to provide a service that's safe and effective. However, if you are experiencing extreme forms of problem behavior or mental health crisis, or your child is, we certainly encourage you to reach out to the Autism Society so we can try to support you in connecting you to the resources, whether they're in our organization or outside of our organization. We are here to help you. So if you're interested in learning more about this rapid response clinical consultation service, I encourage you, and you guys will have these slides that you can reach out to directly to my clinical director. He is very quick to respond, and he wants to hear from you. So there is his contact information if you want to learn more about this service. Also, of course, just want to point you all to the Autism Society of North Carolina's COVID-19 page, which offers a variety of resources and information relevant during this pandemic. We have a growing body. I don't remember how many there are. I think there's 40 plus at this point, recorded webinars. We also have a growing body of recorded webinars in Spanish as well, on a variety of topics. And many of them were designed during COVID-19 and are relevant, highly relevant to challenges related to COVID-19. And then we've also been producing, and this will continue, a wide range of social stories, or better termed social narratives, to explain a variety of different situations to an individual with autism. So for example, we've developed a social narrative on why you might have to wear a mask, or why there isn't going to be school today, or now I'm going back to school, or temperature checks, and so on and so forth. We recently just developed social narratives at different levels of complexity to explain COVID-19 testing procedures, should anyone unfortunately have to undergo that experience. So just know that we are here to support you. Again, me and Jolana's email address is at the beginning of this presentation for you. The Autism Resource Specialists are here for you. The clinical department is ready to hear from you through that rapid response clinical consultation service. And we welcome any questions that you all have. Kim, have we gotten any questions yet?
Yes, there's a wonderful question that is waiting for your response, Louise. I remember this well. My son is now 24, and I'm thinking back to when he was much younger. But evidently, this child with autism is sitting at his laptop, but he's playing around with all the keys, not using them on the keyboard the way that he or she is supposed to. Do you have any suggestions, even though they've tried to ask him to stop, or her?
Yeah.
What are some of your suggestions, Louise?
I think, well, not knowing the individual, but my first thought is, I wonder if it would be a good idea to kind of go back to that original slide. I had the thought of starting very small, starting very short, starting very simple. So like, and looking at celebrating those baby steps. So if he or she is one who is highly distracted and just kind of inclined to touch everything and touch a bunch of keys, then I might say maybe you're looking for one targeted response where you're supporting your child, for example. Maybe you're even guiding them a little bit in pushing the right button, for example, and then you celebrate that and you move them away from the computer to celebrate that. And then you come back for the next response, and you're supporting them in providing that one response to that one key, and then you're moving them away again. And so, it depends on what the content is that they're being asked to respond to. That's sort of what I'm trying to picture too. But if they're really just sitting on the computer and just pushing a bunch of buttons to kind of get that feedback from a sensory perspective, whether it's visual or tactile, I would say they're going to need a lot of support in just, keeping it very short, small responses versus, longer periods where they're sitting with more opportunities to kind of push all the buttons. And so trying to kind of go for a quick win and then moving them away again. And it seems, and I don't know this for sure, it seems to me like maybe they don't understand, and I could be wrong about this, the purpose of maybe what it is that they're supposed to respond to. If they're just pushing a bunch of buttons and they're not attending to what they're being asked to respond to, I wonder if we also need to reconsider on the educational side, the way in which the information is being presented to them, or the way in which the questions are being presented. Is it possible for them to respond without pushing buttons? Is there other ways that they could respond more effectively, whether that's using pencil and paper? Is that through object manipulation? Is that vocal responding? What would be ways that might get them more engaged and more successful if the keyboard itself is really overstimulating or too seductive, so to speak? They're just wanting to touch it all the time. That's what I got out of the gate for you. Kim, do you have any thoughts on that? It's a good question.
What if, like, this kiddo is unable to even access any kind of virtual learning like that? Do you think that it would be advisable for the parent to talk to the teacher to even get some coaching from the teacher to help some strategies?
Oh yeah, I should have said that. Yeah, I mean that was my other thing I was going to default back to, of course, is in addition to any ideas I just gave you, the aim should be to go back to the educator and seek support and show them or tell them what's going on and ask for some ideas. And if the individual is really, if you feel as though your child is not getting anything, acquiring anything from the virtual context or online context, then it's absolutely critical that you go back to the educational team and express, your concern and ask questions about what are some other ways we might be able to get my child engaged and learning or accessing some of the goals and content. And to be frank, it may not be on a virtual screen. It may have to happen in a different way, at least initially, to kind of get some early success. But yes, you're so right, Kim. Going back to the educational team is critical.
It is, and I want to remind everybody as well that, if your child is used to using manipulatives and objects and different ways of learning, I know that the teachers are more than happy to pull together some fun little packets that you could then use with your child at home. We have another question. Says, any suggestions for a child that will not attend a virtual session at all? We have tried the parent holding the device, using Google Meet, FaceTime, any form of video options.
I would say then it's obviously, going back to the professional, the provider, whether it's educational or telehealth, like clinical services, whatever service that is, if that child is just not attending and responding, and that's true for, we're finding, of course, that is true for many, then that mode of learning may just not be the right starting point during this phase, obviously. And a lot of it can be told, in terms of what were they doing back in the classroom, was a lot of the instruction more object-based, more manipulative-based, more based on movement and interaction and lots of modeling and lots of even some variety of forms of prompting and support to guide that student in responding. If those have been the strategies that were most effective when they were in a brick and mortar school setting, then it's very likely that they're going to struggle to kind of go from that to a two-dimensional screen format. And so it's going to, I just, we found that to be very true. We as the Autism Society in our own clinical department, some of our own clients, we can't serve directly through a telehealth format. It's got to be live and direct. Was what we found on the clinical side of the house. And so I would say go back to that educational team, and again, and show data, show it in video format. Take quick videos on your phone, take photos, take some data on how long they were able to look towards the computer before they were walking away and looking away. Take some basic data on behaviors, if problem behaviors are accompanying those situations, and go back to the team positively and collaboratively and seek assistance.
So we have another one that came in. This is for an older child that's in 10th grade, and they're wondering if it would be inappropriate to ask the teacher if there are certain points that we should be focusing on so that we don't hit, if we can't, or if it's too difficult to hit every single assignment.
Absolutely. Jelana and I both noted that, I had that slide on make it fun, make it functional, make it motivating, and focus on those areas. To some extent, prioritize. I mean, really, the word is prioritize, and you've got to prioritize in collaboration with the educational team. And I know Jelana definitely emphasized that as well. So yes, there may be bigger fish to fry. There's kind of a hierarchy of things that you might, some things are maybe more important. Some goals and skills may be most important to maintain during this time or to try to advance during this time. And I would say sometimes they're not all equal with each other. So I would say definitely go back to the educational team and ask for those suggestions, or ask to talk about, do we need to prioritize certain things right now differently than maybe they currently are prioritized? I think that's really critical.
That's really, really great advice, Louise. Thank you. And again, just want to remind everybody that this is kind of the areas where the autism resource specialist can help out. And if you're even feeling a little uncomfortable on how to express yourself, they can actually even be on that parent-teacher conference with you, or if you did need to call an individualized education plan, they can help you out that way as well, if that would be of support. So really great questions.
I know I've seen your team, Kim, give really great advice also for families who need some help wordsmithing. They want to convey
Yes.
particular for question or needs, and you guys are so amazing at wordsmithing and helping it to be positive and clear. And I think that's, yeah, you guys are an amazing resource for that as well.